Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and today we're going to be doing part 2 of the prequel series, and that is how we've actually built out this side of the fish room. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at how we built this thing out. And I think it's kind of interesting because I had very different ideas when I first started thinking about the room compared to how it actually turned out behind us. And I think that's kind of interesting. Now, one of the things I didn't do a good job of, because I was just kind of documenting the steps, is go into great detail about how I built some of the stands or painted the tanks. But the nice thing is I have videos on just about everything we did. So I have a video on how we did the air filtration system, the wastewater system, how we painted the tanks, how we built the stands. And throughout this video, I will put cards in the upper right-hand corner so that you can see how that was done. So stay tuned. We're going to show you how the fish room was built. Hope you enjoy it. So this is the fish room before it was a fish room. I had tanks at this point. I had 275 gallons. I had the PVC for the wastewater. There was some office furniture in here. This is what it looked like before anything was ever in here. And what's interesting is, I went back and the audio is really, really bad, so I didn't include it. I just decided to do this voiceover. But I was thinking at the time that I was going to have a couple 125s on that wall. I was going to have some 20 longs over there. And then on the wall to the left, I was going to have some more 125s. And possibly, I was thinking about triple stacking some 40-gallon breeders. And that was going to be the majority of the fish room. And then if I had room left over on the back wall to the right, I was going to put in a couple more 40-gallon breeders. And it's amazing how much the plan changed when I really started to think about the types of fish I wanted to keep and the amount of fish that I wanted to have. And I realized with just a few 125s and a few 40-gallon breeders and maybe some 20s, I wasn't going to have a lot of variety. And so that was a concern. At this point, we didn't have a sink down in the basement. And in the really bad audio, I talk about the fact that that's going to be necessary because with a lot more tanks, doing water changes at the time was terrible. And so I used the example over here. Now this is, obviously right when the fish room was being built, I had these tanks, but at the time we were running water from the upstairs kitchen down here, and the wastewater was just going out the back window over here behind that 37. What I realized in the previous video is I actually showed the 75 and the 150 when they were like 7 or 8 years old, and the rest of the tanks that I showed in the previous video were around this time. So there was a disconnect in terms of the time frame where I was showing those tanks. But yeah, it was crazy how much this stuff changed. And again, it's not going to be a step-by-step because I was just documenting as I was building it. I got the wastewater system in. And one of the mistakes that I made is I started drilling holes periodically throughout this wastewater system, not fully appreciating exactly where the tanks were going to be. And I actually had to go back through, cut out little pieces of PVC, and then silicone them over some of these holes because we were having water flow out of them sometimes. So I had to go back and fix that. But it runs all the way around the room. And of course, you really can't see it now in our fish room because you've got the tanks in front. But the holes that we can reach, and I had all these holes in the back. And again, once I put the tanks in, those holes that are there are completely unreachable. If I could go back and do it again, I would have done what I did on the other side, and that is extend some vertical pieces of PVC straight up and then just put the hoses in those vertical pieces of PVC. But all these holes we have drilled in, a lot of them are unusable, and so now we're stuck with just a few in random places. We can see here how I brought it back around the back of the room, and there's the floor drain. And so at that point in the floor drain, we just had the stuff from the air conditioner and that one drain from this side of the room. And of course, if you were to look at it now, it's crazy back there because I've got 3 different sections of the fish room all piped into that one area. Again, at this time I just had the 75s. So by this point I've got more tanks. I went out, there was a $1 per gallon sale. I went out and got 40-gallon breeders and I got 20-gallon longs. This is the sink when it first got put in. This was huge for us, finally having running water with both hot and cold water in the basement. That made life a lot easier, and if you're going to build a fish room, it's an absolute must. I mean, it sounds crazy that we didn't have it in the beginning, but it really, really is a must. And so we picked up some 10 gallons as well. So at this point, I understood that I needed more tanks, not quite as large as I wanted to go, but at this point I knew the general layout of the room, that the back wall was going to be 40-gallon breeders, that the wall on the right was going to be 20 longs, that the wall on the left, it was going to be 75s, and I left some space for future development. And that was super important. And of course, at this point, I'm also thinking about the air system, but I wanted to do that a little bit later once I had everything kind of, you know, situated and we really had a good idea of the height. Of course, I don't show all the stand building, which is kind of sad, but you know, I had to go out and I had to start building all the stands, which was the next step, and that took a long time. The thing we decided early on is, okay, well, we've got to get these tanks painted. I wanted to make sure that we had a solid background on the tanks. You know, a lot of times it makes the fish stand out a little bit nicer. We did choose black. I know there's, you know, a lot of opinions. Some people don't like a background. Some people like a lighter one, blue. But I felt just uniformity would be nice to have here. So we painted all the tanks black. And I've got videos on how to paint tanks. I'll put a card in the upper right-hand corner. We just use an acrylic paint and a roller, and it works great. It's not super permanent. So if you wanted to scrape it off, you could take a razor blade and do that. But so far, it's stood the test of time. These tanks have been painted now for a couple years, and we haven't had any issues, so that's good. But if we ever wanted to go a different color, all we have to do is drain the water, flip the tank around, scrape it off with a razor blade, wipe it down, and start over again, which is kind of nice. And here you can see, again, I wish I would have done more documentation on building the stands and the air system and everything. But this is kind of what it looked like. The stands had just gone up. We started getting tanks on the stands, which was really cool. That was exciting. It just started to feel a little bit like a fish room at this point. I remember being really excited, just having things in place. In fact, you can still see that we were missing one of the 40-gallon breeders because I think we had finally exhausted all of the 40-gallon breeders at the $1 per gallon sale. And yeah, it was just, look, there's my head. It was really cool. And you can still see, you know, a lot of the fish room here. You know, we started thinking about, okay, what are we going to put on this wall? I think that might be a 10-gallon. Of course, that changed to a double stand as well. But it was just a lot of fun getting this thing up and running and starting to see the fish room come together. Again, sorry for the video quality. This was never meant to really be a YouTube thing. It was just more documentation. So it was a lot of fun getting this up and running. And this is where I wish I would have done more documentation. We go from, hey, there's tanks on the floor, to bam, everything is running. So this was like super early. We had just gotten everything going. I had built out all the stands. It took me quite a bit of time. You know, it took me a few weeks to get all the stands built. It took me a little while to get the air system up and running. I've got a video on how I did that. I have a video on how we build our stands as well. So I will put those in the upper right-hand corner as well throughout this video. You can see the low boy. At this point, I didn't even have all the lights, and so the vast majority of the lights that we run are Finnick Stingrays. I've got a video on that as well. And I think, yeah, the first fish in the fish room were these goldfish. I got those from someone who couldn't take care of them anymore. So the idea here was they were in a 20-gallon. I wanted to get them in a 40-gallon breeder, and that's what we did over there. And yeah, they were the first ones. I also had to make all the lids for that. And again, we've got videos on all this stuff, how we made the polycarbonate lids and where to get those from. So I'll try to put that in the upper right-hand corner at some point in this video. You can see here we got the sponge filters running. This tank with these comet goldfish, they were just feeder goldfish that grew too large for the 20-gallon that they were in. So I said, okay, I'll take them. I threw them in here, and we had these for a while. In fact, they got quite a bit larger after they wound up in this tank, but eventually they got too big for this tank, and we found somebody who had a pond, and they wound up with them. And to the best of my knowledge, I believe they are still alive and happy and doing well. But it was nice just to have fish in the fish room. You go through this giant process of building this thing out, and then to actually see water in tanks, it's just so cool. You know, getting the lights on, and all of a sudden it's starting to look like something, and getting fish in. That was a big first step, which was also pretty darn cool. And I'll show you some of the other tanks when they were like really first starting. So here we see the fish room still coming along. We got the low boy in, all the lights are in. We got the other 40-gallon breeder. There's fish in the 20s on the right-hand side, one of the 40s, at least one of the 40s, if not more, has fish in it. We're starting to put fish in the 75s. I remember thinking this was a lot of fun. And we had all these tanks and all this space to do a lot more stuff. And it's amazing how quickly you will fill tanks when you have them. If you have them, you will fill them. And so this was really cool. Just to again, seeing fish in a fish room was really awesome. There we found that 23-gallon bow front. And then we come over to the other side, and of course that thing, you know, we still had the 29, and that we added a 20 long. That was a quarantine tank. You can see back there the Oscars are getting bigger. We're already trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with them, because they're outgrowing the 55. You know, and just adding what we had on the other side to this side was a lot of fun. It was really exciting for us. All right, everybody, so that was how the fish room was built and how it came along. I have one more set of videos that I found, and that is really early on, the fish that we had in the fish room right when we set it up. So I'll probably post that at some point in the near future. It's really cool because a lot of the fish that you see here were babies. Some of the fish that you see in the videos we don't have anymore, some of which have grown up and had lots and lots of little babies themselves. So if you like this video, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.